What's going on, guys? Thanks for tuning into this next segment of the Sunday Scaries portion of the podcast. In today's segment, we talked about three main topics. The first being we caught up with Cohort-5, considering they're in their second week of the class, and we just kind of gauged how things were going. They also asked me about my plans for moving down to El Salvador, and we dove a little bit into that, and they pointed me in some good direction with some connections down there. So it was very beneficial to myself. The second big topic we talked about was the philosophy behind Bitcoin and the implementation of CBDCs and how CBDCs could potentially be a Trojan horse for the adoption of the Bitcoin standard. Very interesting conversation. And lastly, of course, it wouldn't be an appropriate Sunday Scaries if we didn't talk about some news in the week. The big news being the Bword podcast or the Bword Conference with Jack Mallers, Cathie Wood, and Elon Musk. I know a lot of people thought it was a boom. It definitely was for Bitcoiners, but I think for the uninitiated no corners, it was a very good podcast. But you'll get all of our opinions in the episode. As always, remember, this is not financial advice. Anything we do or say is for purely educational purposes only. And if you haven't yet already, please hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, because that's the best way to support the podcast. Lastly, if you want to be on the Sunday Scaries portion of the podcast, there are two ways you can find out. The first being following me on Twitter, which my handle is at Allen Hodl. That is ALLENHODL. No, I did not spell hold wrong. The second Twitter handle you could follow is the podcast handle at COB Podcast. I usually tweet out the link on Thursday night. I retweet it again on Friday, and then I post it one more time an hour before on Saturday when we record this session. So if you want to join in, I'd love to see your lovely faces. Please tell me how bad my takes are. I appreciate any kinds of criticisms, and it's a great way to meet us. So enough of the rambling. Enjoy the show.
Yo, Paul, what's up?
What's going on, Morgan?
How's it going, you guys?
We're going to wait for people to trickle in here.
No, it's all good. I should probably get a hat because my hair looks like shit. I like your hat, dude.
Dude, I'm like committed to this hat. I've like worn this hat almost for like every episode. So
there you go. It's like your thing now.
I know, but it has nothing to do with the show though. It's a Browning hat, like I hunt, but
that's good. Hey, you're building your personal brand. I'll be right back.
For sure. I learned from the best. What can I say?
Hey, Alan, did you guys change the name of the podcast?
No, the podcast still the Citizens of Blockchain, but like the Sunday Scaries portion. So like this is just called like the Sunday Scaries segment, and then we got like our interviews on the Saturday. Side. We record on Saturday. See, this is the problem. I got to change the name because it's all like everyone says the same thing. It's like, wait a second, we're recording today on Saturday, and I'm like, well, it's uploaded on Sunday.
I get it. Okay.
Yeah. Got a couple people trickling in here.
Maybe you should make a Citizens of Blockchain hat and sell some merch,
So we had so the episode's not out yet, but we had an episode with Dan Sanchez, and his whole thing is blockchain domain names. Pomp does like an advertisement for it, but he gave us the Citizens of Blockchain domain name, which is awesome. And then one of our old cohort classmates, Bill Skid, is going to help us get our online store together. So there's a lot of things in the works. You gotta remember, I've only been at this 2 months, so we're gearing up for lots of great stuff.
Exciting. Okay.
Very exciting. Couple people in here. I see Harold's in here. Harold, how's it going, man?
Doing great, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Trying to wake up. My son's kept me up all night, so I'm a little tired and there's actually no caffeine in here, believe it or not. It's just water.
What part of the country are you in?
I'm in the Midwest.
Okay.
How about yourself?
I'm down in just outside of Tampa, Florida.
Oh, beautiful weather, I'm sure. Very beautiful weather. It's about 100 degrees and humid here right now where I'm at.
Wow.
Not
That's
fun.
hot.
I'm trying to stack sats to get the hell out of the Midwest.
Where do you want to move to?
I'm actually moving to El Salvador, believe it or not.
Wow,
Mhm.
that's awesome, man.
Yeah,
You
it's
going to El Zante?
what's that?
You going down to El Zante?
I am going down to El Zante.
That's
So we're going to be moving to the capital, my wife and son and I, and we're going to might be down there for a year, maybe a year and a half. But some things in the works. She's talking to a dentist down there. She's a dental hygienist. So she'll be fronting the bills for a little bit, which will be nice. And I get to go down and write, photograph, video, all the fun stuff. It's a risky play, I know, but no success was ever made by playing it safe because growth and comfort do not coexist.
I'm fascinated by that comment because I'm thinking of going down there to visit myself. Besides the Jack Mahler's thing, was there anything else that inspired you to go down there?
So the biggest thing, it kind of doesn't answer your question because this does coincide with what Jack Mahler's did. But for me, what's more fascinating is we've never seen in the history of man, and we'll never see it play out again as the first mover, that a nation state adopts a currency that isn't controlled by any one entity or government. El Salvador is in a unique situation considering that they are dollarized and they've been off the colon, I think, since the 90s. I might be incorrect on that. But so it makes a little bit more sense because they didn't really have a whole lot of, they couldn't really create a lot of their own monetary policy. They were beholden to the United States government for a lot of that stuff. So it made a lot of sense for them to be like, well, we already don't have control of the money, so let's opt for both systems and let's just see which one plays out the best. But I was in a Twitter Spaces room the other night with a couple of people down in El Salvador, some people from Argentina, and a lot of the stuff they were talking about, it was a lot of interesting thoughts. But like, there's a lot of families down there, the ones that would be needing remittance payments and like Bitcoin payments. Some of these families, they have like one smartphone for the entire household, and that whole household might be anywhere from 5 to 10 people. So there comes a bit of an issue there as far as like educating and implementing the use of money and being able to spend it. So like Bitcoin's great for remittance payments, but a lot of their I guess local economy is built up by using efectivo, which is just it's just a nice Spanish word for cash. But the problem with Bitcoin is you kind of have to assume that the infrastructure, the cellular infrastructure, and the internet infrastructure is down there to exchange money one to one. Easy for us to set up here in the States because I mean, everywhere you go, I mean, if you meet somebody without a cell phone or a smartphone, you're kind of like, hey bro, why are you living in the 90s? Like you should have a phone. But down there, that is a reality. And so I just wrap up my point. I'm kind of rambling here. But I want to go down. There's a lot of misinformation shooting out from there. I don't know if you guys are super active on Twitter. But there has been a big, I don't want to say big movement, but there have been people that have been kind of organizing and saying no a la ley Bitcoin, which is no to the new law of Bitcoin. And for good reason. There's obviously people who are closer to the money spigot there that don't want to see their power and control taken away from them. And they're co-opting people who are not very educated on the subject matter, and essentially feeding them a false narrative of what Bitcoin's trying to do, partially because there's a lot of scams, there's a lot of bad actors, and there's a lot of people who aren't necessarily in Bitcoin but using the Bitcoin name to capitalize on the ignorance or innocence of some of these people. So it's going to be a hard process, and I want to go down there. I want to videograph, I want to write, and I want to take video of just what's going on from an unbiased perspective.
Awesome. 2 questions. Do you speak Spanish?
I sí hablo español.
And how did you learn Spanish?
So I'm very fortunate. My mother actually is from Mexico City. So I grew up growing up from like 1 to, I want to say like 11 was the last time I spent time up in the northern part of Mexico, but I would spend my summers there with family. So I was very fortunate. I kind of learned the non-traditional way, which was good. My Spanish is very northern Mexico bastardized type form. But that's better than learning in a traditional setting where they're teaching you the Castilian dialect. They're teaching you formal and vosotros and like all these kind of ways, these formal writing ways to speak, but not really how the people speak the language.
Sure. No, I was born in Venezuela, so I have an appreciation. I could tell by your pronunciation that you had very good, pronunciation of Spanish. And I'm not saying that to compliment you, but often Americans have when they speak, you can understand them and they're speaking perfectly, but their pronunciation is more Americanized, and yours was very Spanish. Yeah. And that's totally fine. But second question, have you been to El Salvador before?
I have not been to El Salvador. So we have a couple, we were planning to go down in September due to recent changes and potential changes in laws. We're going to hold off and see how things play out. So it might not be until January we go down, and then we're going to have to squeeze in another trip, I guess February or March, because we want to make the move by April. But I don't want to rush anything either, because this is a big move. It's not like I'm just going down there myself and moving everything. It's not like I don't have anything I need to sell. I mean, we're right now in the process of throwing up the house for sale, figuring out how we're going to get rid of our vehicles, and like seeing if family wants to take care of like furniture, or if we need to sell that too. So, and not only that, but figuring out like tax implementations. Like, if I go down there, there's a good chance I'll be able to work remotely and I don't have to pay any foreign tax, either to El Salvador or being foreign taxed out, because I'm still getting paid by an American company in my American bank account. There's kind of ways to get around that. But my wife, on the other hand, if she's taking a job there locally, there's a lot of tax. So we're learning as we're going on here. I mean, there's a lot of research. It's not, unfortunately, a move that you could just make kind of overnight.
And last question. I don't know if you're aware of this, and I can't remember the specifics, so my question is going to be kind of vague. But I remember after the strike announcement, I listened to a couple of podcasts, and they had, after the law was passed making Bitcoin legal tender, didn't they have a 60 or 90-day timetable to accomplish certain things in the implementation of Bitcoin for the law to remain effective?
I believe, Morgan, you might know a little bit better than I, so feel free to chime in here. But I believe it was a 60-day implementation, and it was for the wallets, for the government wallets to get implemented. So not the wallets that Strike provides, but I think Strike is working in conjunction to kind of guide the government. And when that wallet was implemented, I think it was $30 worth of Bitcoin that they were going to give every citizen. So like 20,000 sats, I think, or so, something of the sorts like that.
Yeah, I think my understanding. So, so there were some 60-day timelines, some 90-day timelines for just different policy objectives. I don't necessarily think that if they hadn't achieved those in that time frame, that it would have disqualified any of the law. I think those were goals, and they were pretty ambitious goals. If you look at the timeline, like imagine like the U.S. government rolling out a program like that in 60 days, like that'd be unheard of. So I commend them for that. But yeah, I think the first one that we saw was the wallet, and that believe that was launched successfully, and I think that's been rolled out as of now. So yeah, it's cool.
Harold, I'm trying to find some stuff here, documents wise. If I find them, I'll throw them up in the Twitter here. Couple other people.
Do any surfing down there, Alan?
Dude, I need to learn. I didn't know how big the surfing community was down.
It's huge.
It's huge. They just had, what was it, the World?
Yeah, they just had the ISA World Surfing Games there.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's cool. I've always wanted to go down to South America to go surfing. being a surfer here in Northern California. But I, now that I've got a buddy down there, or at least I will at some point, right?
Right.
We
You
all
got a
come
crouch
surf.
to catch on. We'll have to go. We got a couple other people in here. I just want to say hello real quick to Irving. Irving, what's going on? And then my co-host Shawn also popped in here. So what's up, Shawn?
Yeah, I was just getting back from Philly, so I came in a little late.
No, all good. We just got the ball rolling here. I think this is
Yeah.
kind of the squad for the day today. Some other people might roll in. I know Lawrence, Axe Cap, yeah, he does Black and Bullish Tuesdays on Twitter, and he's a big member in Black Bitcoin Billionaires over at Clubhouse, but he should be popping in here at some point or another.
Awesome. Hey, thank you guys for moving the time. It makes it so much more doable for me.
Well, Paul actually brought to my attention that my time zone logic was very off. So, Paul, thank you for correcting my mistakes there. He recommended that, for one, I was doing Central Standard Time, not daylight saving.
Right.
So he pointed that out, and he was like, "You should probably put West and East Coast time zones since you're a loser and live in the Midwest." No, he didn't say it that way.
I have that experience.
Minneapolis, man. The Midwest is all right, so it's okay.
Yeah. I'll be in Colorado in the fall, so I'll join you in the Midwest experience.
Do we consider is Colorado the Midwest? I don't know.
Like,
it might be stretching it a little
more
bit.
West, right?
It's more mountain. They got their own time zone, don't they? It's
Yeah.
like mountain time
Yeah, it is.
or whatever. But yeah, what's going? Okay, so Cohort 5. Let me. Most of you guys are in here from Cohort 5. How'd the second week go?
It's great, man. I mean, we're building on what we learned last week, and I mean, I wanted to keep going. I mean, I'm having so much fun just kind of meeting like-minded people, and we're being forced to really like kind of like stretch us. I think on Monday we got like 6 classes or something like that. It's like from 7 a.m. to like 8:30. We're just packed. So
yeah, Monday is our discussion groups or deep dive apocalypse, what I like to call it. And for some reason, we always have that. There's one day every cohort where everybody has a deep dive or a workshop on the same day. And so, so Monday we've got, I think it's literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 discussion groups, deep dives that you can attend that day, plus an assignment. So lots to do.
that's right. Our second part of our homework is so actually, Morgan, did they do the video for Cohort 3, or is it just the last time?
The video for Cohort 3.
You explain like a blockchain concept to like a child, a teenager, a college student, grad student.
That's a good question. Alan, did you guys do the video?
We did on no, I forgot what the service was. You made us download some app.
Yeah, I forget specifically when we kind of implemented the current, because basically the great thing about cohort-based education is that you can iterate throughout. It gives you kind of like a 3-week period to try something new, see if it worked. Usually, we get really great feedback on a lot of the things that we implement thus far. We've been lucky. And then we can go ahead and make those changes. And so like the course kind of gets better and better over time, which is great. But we're actually thinking about doing, so the video assignment, it's kind of funny. It's a point of contention for the coaches because all of us want to do a different one, but we don't want to make you guys do like 5 video assignments. So we're like, okay, fighting over this like 1 video assignment slot. I personally would love to do like an intro video where you introduce yourself to like companies, right? And give yourself like a 2-minute elevator pitch. And then instead of in the workshop, people raising their hands and trying to basically sell themselves or kind of like be a little shilly, we could just go ahead and send those to the recruiters, and then they can go through them on their own time and get a sense of who you guys are. I think that would be really helpful. So we might try that out next time, but yeah, we've had video assignments from the beginning. It's just a question of like what the iteration was. So
Did Kenny link that? I think it was a Wired video that inspired the assignment where I think the lady's explaining blockchain to what is it, like a kindergartner, middle schooler or something like that. Yeah,
I just dropped it in the chat because I was watching that like right before this, because I'm going to do mine on DeFi. So I got to explain what is decentralized finance to a child, and I don't even know where to begin. But I was kind of thinking it'd be like Halloween, where like everyone's wearing a mask, so you could like you have all this like candy from out trick or treating, and maybe you like have a peanut allergy, and you don't want like your peanut M&Ms or a Snickers, so you go to the park and you can kind of anonymously trade candy with other kids in kind of an anonymous environment. And you got to make sure like the candy's still like in its wrapper and it's like legit and not like, you're getting some like regular M&Ms and stuff with some Skittles or whatever. So
I love
I'm
that.
kind of still thinking some ideas, but I got about 4.5 hours to figure that out. So
I've never heard that one before. That's
you'll
fantastic.
you'll hear it by 5 p.m. Eastern time today. So
That's one I'm looking forward to. I always, even though I might not comment on everything, I'm always like looking through that channel to see what people are coming up with, because I always enjoy learning from everybody there. So it's awesome.
I love seeing how much the channel's like growing. It's awesome. And then like seeing like the people that continuously come back and like participate, especially in the memes. The memes are always fire.
Yeah. So on that note, we're trying to, or at least I'm kind of taking this initiative on myself. I'd love to kind of build out the alumni network, because I think there's a lot of benefit that people can get just even after the cohort, as people kind of land jobs and kind of further their career. I think to have people keep coming back will not only add value to future cohorts, but then somebody who is in like the second cohort, for example, like myself, um, the network keeps getting built out over time, and because I can still connect to that, the value is actually just getting bigger and bigger over time. And so it's almost like this dividend that you can pay to early cohort members who took a leap of faith, did it when you guys, might not have had all of these cool features that you do now. So I'm just trying to figure out what the best way to do that is. But
Morgan, that's a great idea.
right.
I'm really actively involved in the Vanderbilt alumni community, and just you're meeting people who, they weren't going to the school at the same time you were, but the fact that you went through that same experience, you kind of have a kind of bond, and people are always trying to help each other with all kinds of things. In fact, just totally random story. I was working in Shanghai. My company sent me back to Tokyo, and I was kind of like down. And so I was like, man, I'm over it. I spent a few years there. I was like, I just want to go back to Japan. It's like a nice quality of life. But some random guy had reached out to me and said, hey, the Alumni Association gave me your email address, that you've been organizing all these events in Beijing and Shanghai for the Vanderbilt alumni. And I was like, ah, man, whatever. I almost deleted this guy's email, but I just kind of like, well, I'll reply to him later. It's like a week later, I responded and said, hey, there's this woman who was helping me. She did the MBA and she's like really active. I connected them. 6 months later, she emailed and say, hey, thanks for connecting me with so-and-so. We're getting married and they have 3 kids now. So,
Wow.
but there's and in fact, one of my previous jobs, I got it because one of the venture capitalists was a startup in New York. One of the venture capitalists, I had gone to school with his daughter. I kind of did my research, and that led to him sending my resume to the president, and I got hired. And
Wow.
I spent 4 years there, did really well. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of value in like an alumni association. And with, the crypto community, we're going to be like, we've got like decades of runway to kind of develop our career.
Oh my gosh,
so,
for sure.
I mean, and people are so like passionate about that. We will help each other. So I think there's a lot of opportunities. So I highly encourage you to build out the alumni program.
So in your mind, like, what was the most successful initiatives that you kind of organized? Like, how did you approach connecting?
I like kind of like in-person events. I mean, doing it through Zoom is obviously good because it's easier for people all over. And I think maybe we just continue doing like, I think later this week or next week we have like an alumni social event on the Friday or whatever. So see how that goes. But we could also have like Pomp meetup groups scattered across the country or the world. Because I mean, I co-host a meetup group in Washington D.C. and I'm inviting people to come join that after the course, because it's on Wednesday evening, so I can't really go right now. But afterwards, there's probably a handful of people that can join. So in-person ones, or maybe a monthly alumni one, or anytime someone gets hired, they could come back and kind of share, their experience of going through the hiring process. Because I think a lot of people, they want to get a job or something like that. So,
and that's the thought too, like that they almost become a pulling force as well as a pushing force. So that's great. What was the cadence that you did those in-person events?
Honestly, they were kind of random. I mean, they're probably
Yeah.
some of them we did like for a while in Tokyo, we do them kind of monthly, just getting together to drink together. But I think the ones in China we did them like quarterly or whatever. So it really depends on, if a leader is really active. So you gotta find people who like are really into this and kind of have like their own community or like community building, and then I
Right.
think it'll take off. So you need someone kind of driving this. So yeah, maybe reach out to people from, every, you could have like, the alumni cohort leader or team, and they would organize some events. But I think a monthly Zoom with the alumni, and maybe you have like 2 or 3 people kind of present like 5 minutes about like where they're working now and if they're hiring and, what they've learned or new trends in the industry. That'd be good.
That's awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, I agree. That would be a couple people come back to speak every now and then, right, Morgan? I mean, Evan Sharif's for my cohort got hired on at was it Nifty Labs, and he spoke a little bit. I always tell everybody LinkedIn's great for the traditional world, but the crypto LinkedIn is actually Twitter. So I always tell people, go find your hiring manager, find the CEO, go follow them on Twitter. I guarantee you their DMs are open, and just say, hey, I want to work for you. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to be like, okay, why? Or okay, send me your resume. I think that's always been, I've had a lot of success with that. Granted, I've been hired nowhere, so regard that as you will. But I'm still in the talks with some companies. So
That's awesome.
I definitely recommend it. I see John just hopped in here. John, did you start your podcast yet?
Bitcoin.
No, we're
Let's
doing
go.
unmute me. Can you hear me?
Yeah, what's going on, John?
No, we're doing a meeting tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock with a few people to just kind of talk about logistics and help me, quite honestly, because I've never done anything like this, kind of understand how, mechanically to make it work. You know what I mean? So I'm also still working on my my project, interviewing my granddaughter, my daughter, my wife, and my mother for that project. So that's gonna take some technical skill that'll carry over as well. So
Hey,
is that a good enough answer?
John, could you actually share your podcast idea? Because I don't think everybody is aware of what it's about.
So we want in one of the workshops we talked about doing a podcast targeting boomers, okay, and we're going to expand it to barbells, boomers, and Bitcoin, barbells, boomers, and cryptocurrency, so that we just feel that there's a whole cohort of people out there that don't really know what the hell is going on with. Sorry about the Harleys. Don't know what the hell is going on with cryptocurrency, and especially guys in my age group, women and men in my age group, because we just hear, like, I'm an OG. I've been doing it for a long time, and I'm deeply entrenched. But there's a lot of people out there that they're like, oh, rat poison. Warren Buffett says no way. All these different things. So we got to spread the word,
John, you're the man to do that. I mean, I got some faith in you. I'm targeting some Gen Zers here, some Zoomers. So we need the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, we're gonna really lock out everyone but boomers. Like anybody can listen, but the boomers are the ones we interview. Maybe a couple of people. We might let Pomp on. You know what I mean? Or Travis Clinton, someone like that. That can really give us some understanding. But I think it's going to take a month or 2 or 3 of just real basic level stuff before people start to understand, and before we can get into a deep dive,
So you touched on what I like to say, what Bitcoin does. Bitcoin has no heroes, and you learn to slowly slay. Bitcoin slays every hero that's out there. You mentioned Warren Buffett as kind of like a, I guess, wall for a lot of boomers to kind of get across that, because Warren's been very, I don't believe in Bitcoin, but Warren's very, I don't understand it, I'm not investing in it.
Right.
And he's been like that with a lot a lot of the tech sector for a while. But what are some other common things you hear people say, John, in regards to Bitcoin? What are some common misunderstandings that people in your age group have?
So this is the last question I can answer because my wife just said I'm leaving. She
No problem.
took off on the bikes. But I really think that they are they're risk adverse. When you're 61 years old, you know, if you lose everything on some market fluctuation, you're nervous. You know what I mean? So I think that it's the kind of thing where you have to look at it over like a 5-year time horizon as opposed to a 2 time horizon, because in any given 2 weeks, you know, we're up or down 20%, but year after year we're up 200% per year for the last 5 years. So guys, thanks for listening to me or including me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure, John. It's good to hear you, bud.
You know, he makes a good point that, you know, as you approach retirement, you cannot be taking on these risky investments. But, you know, Bitcoin has outperformed every asset class, you know, 10 out of the past 12 years. I mean, I think over the past decade, it's like an average annualized return of 230%. So you're missing out. I mean, yes, it is very volatile, but you're missing out on a lot of long-term growth. And, you know, maybe an easy way for, you know, kind of the older generation is maybe stable coins, because a lot of people are moving money into cash or fixed income securities, but like the yields are so low that they might not be able to retire and hit their certain targets with such low yields. So, you know, you could just put some into some stable coins and get some, you know, much higher yields, and it's still, you know, relatively safe. If it's something like USDC. I wouldn't advise them to go into something like Tether, but anyway, it should be interesting to see how you know, his podcast plays out.
Yeah, I think it's really important to reach that sector. Stable coins, Paul, for a long time, I was kind of in the same mindset too, being like, maybe I should push people towards the stable coin sector. And my traditional argument was, hey, how much do you get in your savings account? People are like, maybe 0.5%. That's a high yield savings account nowadays. And I'm like, well, you know, inflation traditionally is 2% per year. So your savings account isn't even outpacing inflation. So what if I told you there was a stable coin out there that could get you 5% or even 12%? And then they kind of start talking. But with recent, I don't know if you guys heard about the BlockFi news in New Jersey. There's a lot of FUD temporary that was around that. As of right now, it's only targeting New Jersey customers. But the problem is that New Jersey is a pretty big state, kind of like New York when it comes to financial regulation. And depending on how that ruling turns out, it's going to affect a lot of the other companies like Celsius, Abra, Nexo, that are offering high interest yield type returns. And the problem with some of these stable coins too, that the biggest problem always with any of these coins is that they're all inherently centralized. They have a central point of failure. So if Amazon Web Servers or wherever the hosting services are hosted, if the government comes in and is like, hey, we need to pull the plug on this, then poof, all the money's gone. So I think I think stable coins are a great way to segue into the conversation, but I've always been and granted, I'm very pro Bitcoin, so I always end up pushing people towards Bitcoin. But my father himself, he's in an older age group, and I told him, I said, hey, can you stomach some volatility for 4 years until the next halving? I was like, do you need whatever funds that you want to put in there in the next 4 years? He's like, no. I'm like, okay, we got time then. So this is our time horizon, 4 years. I think that's relatively reasonable for somebody in an older age group. And I'm like, hey, I can at least guarantee you a 200% return based off of previous statistics and just the adoption curve that's going on right now. And that's better than anything else that's out there. Anything.
So for me, just speaking on that point, like how do you get older people interested in Bitcoin and buying Bitcoin? My dad actually is way more pro Bitcoin than I am, if you can believe that. And the reason being, and of course I grew up in the Bay Area, so we're kind of local to this area. But the analogy that really resonates with him is the analogy of like the internet. He was around, he was coding, back when the internet was first starting. He was working in like COBOL. He was building like payment solutions there. But he kind of transitioned out into banking, but he kind of was really close to that industry and saw it grow. And I think that's kind of a relevant analogy for Bitcoin, where if you actually examine like the space and what's happening here, it's very analogous to that time in the internet. I think the latest statistic was that like there are many crypto users as there were internet users in '98, right? And so if you kind of can talk about it in that way, that this is an emerging industry, right? The winners and losers haven't been picked yet, but like the technology's there and the underlying technology, right? What's the fundamental innovation here? It's blockchain. So how do you invest in blockchain? The most direct way to do that is to buy Bitcoin. So that was kind of the way that we talked about it, and he's stoked. He's super stoked. So I don't know if that's like an angle that people might want to approach. Paul, what's up?
No, Morgan, I just want to kind of continue that point. I mean, I totally agree with that analogy. And I'm an old guy. I graduated, from college during the .com boom, so I saw all this growth. And I agree. We're kind of in like the mid-late '90s, if you kind of want to put in that kind of time frame, when people were like using dial-up modems and the internet was really, really slow. And if you're on the internet, like you couldn't like use your telephone. And it was really a really poor user experience. But then we got like ISDN and it was a little bit faster. But now we're on like, gigabit, like Ethernet broadband. And we don't have we're still developing like 5G and the next generation type of things. But like we're still at that dial-up modem ISDN phase. And we don't even have the full adoption of this yet. And I think we will get there. But it's going to take 5 to 10 years until like everybody's like transacting on some sort of digital currency, whether that's Bitcoin over Strike or their, USDC is kind of like the default quasi like Fed coin or something like that. But I think the advantages greatly outweigh the disadvantages. And if you look back at the growth of the internet, I mean, we went from like very static web pages and email to like, much more richer multimedia like video and social media. And now as you enter Web3, it's like the transfer of value, taking back your digital identity from Facebook and Google. And I think people are, once they get it, they'll be like, yeah, this is a much better way. And then we'll, who knows where it's going to go 10 years from now. Back in the, mid-late '90s, no one could predict, in 10 years what would happen. We never had the idea of like social media was like, no one had thought about that yet. So it'll be interesting to see, but I think you're right. This is like still the very, very beginning of a long-term trend.
Yeah, it's like that last point is really important. It's like when we invented information as a network, it enabled all of these amazing things like Uber, right? Who could have predicted Uber? And then once we invent value as a network, what does that do, right? I think that has the potential to be even larger in terms of the changes on society that we see, even more so than the internet. So I totally agree.
Real quick, if anybody wants to speak, I saw Paul raised his hand. Please raise your hand or else I might like skip over you. Christopher, what's going on, man? You've been super patient. I'm sorry.
No, I'm not. I'm just like, I was really interested in what Paul's saying because I totally agree with that. And, I feel like blockchain is just waiting for that Facebook moment, not the Facebook moment that was on desktop, but like the mobile Facebook moment where mom and grandma started using Facebook because it was just so easy, intuitive, interactive. Like right now, we're in we're getting bombarded with all of these different interfaces, and they don't flow with one another, and it's very confusing for the average user. But I feel like once we have that Facebook moment where there's an interactive app that has all of these features that makes it like really easy and incentivizes people to use it, I think that's what we're kind of waiting for. I think we'll have it soon in the next 5 to 10 years, but it's going to be that Web3 where you start seeing these applications pop up that all work with one another. They're not just independent, but it allows the user to have a unified identity across all of them, to be able to exchange that value in a trustless way. So that's how I envision it, and like all the social coins coming out and everything working with one another, having Miami Coin coming out recently and seeing like how they're planning to do it. It's just so fascinating. And I think we're just kind of waiting on that Facebook killer app moment, because anybody can argue, yeah, Google, Netscape and everything, but the real like mass adoption killer app moment for the internet was when Facebook went mobile and it just went parabolic. You know what I mean? Because there, you know, colleges were using it and some people were using it, but not until like young people started leaving Facebook was it like, wow, everybody's using this, because it took communication to the next level with like what Paul was saying with the media and the interaction. Like none of that existed before. Like I saw the growth from, you know, using the two-way pagers, and then we went on to the iPhone finally came around when I was like getting into college, and then seeing the growth from all of that. It's like you need the technologies before that to have the technologies above that, and that's kind of what my presentation is going to be, and is general purpose technologies, you know, and blockchain and Bitcoin being that next general purpose technology that sits on top of the internet to allow the internet of value, the internet of money, and all those other things. So yeah, Paul, what's up, man?
I mean, I think I agree with you on how, you know, Facebook provides a very, you know, easy user interface, but I don't think we're there yet. That's like Web 2.0. We're still like on, you know, I'm talking like, you know, Internet 1.0, where, you know, I'd say the Coinbase listing on NASDAQ is kind of like the, the Coinbase list was like, you know, Netscape back in the day, where it was like getting everybody, you know, onboarding people onto the internet back in, you know, the kind of the mid-late 90s. And it's like, you now have access to information. It was still very, very basic. Again, like very static web pages. People just using email for the first time. I think we're at that phase. I think the stage you're talking about, the Facebook moment, whatever you're calling it, we're still a long way from there right now. We've got a lot of infrastructure that needs to be built out. And you know, most of you guys are too young to remember, but back in like 20 years ago, America Online would have like a CD-ROM attached to every single magazine. And I used them as like, you know, coasters for my beer and stuff like that, because they're like all over the place. It was like we played Frisbee with them. But like that was a very good way to get so many people onto the internet, because you just stick it into your CD-ROM drive or whatever, and it'd have all the software kind of like loaded up. So you were able to onboard tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of Americans or people all over the world onto it. So I think that's where we're at right now. Getting to Facebook is probably 5 or 10 years out. So, I mean, I agree with you. It's a very, you know, nice user interface, but I think we've got a lot of building to go until we get to the kind of the social media phase of, you know, the equivalent for blockchain.
So I'm gonna Lawrence, what's going on, man? I'm gonna let you jump in here real quick in a second, because I want to hear your thoughts on here, but I'm gonna tie together Chris and Paul's points here. So I think at the stage of adoption we're introducing broadband. We're introducing broadband via stuff like the Lightning Network. Still a lot of onboarding being going on. And I always really do like the comparison to Silicon Valley and the internet back in the 90s. But when we think about adoption, the one thing that we do have to rectify when we make comparisons is that we know how the internet works pretty well now. We just don't know how the internet works with Bitcoin and Bitcoin's blockchain, and how that interoperability is going to play out. So there's a lot of new hiccups that are kind of in the place, but we can also look on past history and make decisions based off of that, which I think really helps in the situation. But with COVID, I think COVID accelerated things 10 years. I mean, easily by a decade, and everywhere. And as far as like digital and remote goes in the workforce. I mean, up until then, like ordering curbside and ordering through the app and having all these functions and systems of ways for people to get things to you really weren't ushered through until the lockdowns happened. Do I wish we still had the lockdowns? No. But regardless, it ushered in this mentality and mode of thinking that, okay, I can have these things at my fingertips. I can be sovereign and on my own. Now, the big issue with the lockdowns that occurred was the printing of money. A lot of people's eyes were opened up to, hey, the value of my dollar isn't as secure as I previously thought it was. And with things like CBDC or things like stable coins, it's introduced the idea of CBDCs. Jerome Powell, Janet Yellen, they've all talked about how the US infrastructure, the US monetary infrastructure as it stands right now is too slow and outdated. I mean, for Christ's sake, all the way at the base layer of our current money system, 28 days for any kind of cash or any kind of Visa or regular money settlement. It takes that long for it to settle all the way down at the base layer. So there is a big push for the CBDCs to come through. A lot of that, the government really needs it. For one, to throttle the velocity of money, because right now the only two tools that they have at their disposal is inflation, so the printing of money, and the manipulation of interest rates. And we've kind of run those two out of course. So the only other option is to slow the velocity of money. And currently, the only way to implement that tool is to lock down businesses or restrict business and money flow, which isn't really feasible. You can only convince people to stay in their home and not open business for so long. So the other option would be to institute something like a CBDC. We're seeing this play out in China. And their CBDC is very scary because they can put spending stipulations, they can put time stipulations, they can put tracking stipulations, all kinds of stuff. And if they need you to inject money into the economy right away, then they're going to force you to do that by saying, hey, here's some money, but you got to spend it right away. Or if they want to restrict the flow of money, they can be like, hey, we're not going to let you spend on these dates or at these locations or at these places. So it's kind of scary. Now, the benefit to CBDCs, and I think they're inevitable. I really think they're inevitable. I think stable coins have shown the government at how well a digital currency can work. Because right now, a lot of people get confused a lot of times. They're like, well, oh, the dollar's already digital. It's not digital, it's electronic. There's a difference between electronic and digital. We can get into that. But introducing the CBDC, if they institute the kind of similar things China's doing, people aren't going to like that. And it's going to be this Facebook moment in a weird kind of twisted way where all of a sudden, just like Christopher was saying, that the Facebook app ushered social media to everyone's fingertips. CBDCs are going to do the same way for digital currencies. And when people realize that there's a better option, and that better option is Bitcoin, as far as transaction speed, as far as fees, as far as immutability, as far as just no one's in control, and we got a deflationary asset that's infinitely divisible, people all of a sudden are going to inflow and gravitate towards that because the CBDCs are going to force them to understand how wallets work, understand paying with QR codes, like all this kind of stuff. It's the Trojan, what I like to say is CBDCs are the Trojan horse for Bitcoin. Sorry for my rant. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Alan, can I just add one thing?
Yeah,
I think
for sure.
One of the important things to discuss too, when we're talking about central banks' monetary policy tools, is the timeline. You were talking about how central banks are going to need to roll out these digital currencies in order to basically control the velocity of money, right, as a monetary policy tool. I think the U.S. is still a far way from being able to actually launch something like that, and so the policy tools that they have in the interim, right, at least for the next probably 3 years, is fairly limited. I mean, I can see the Fed doing something similar to like the Central Bank of China. The Central Bank of China uses basically the reserve requirement to influence the cash in the system. So by tightening the reserve requirement, requiring banks to hold more money relative to deposits, they can actually take money and kind of money out of the system. And then by lowering that reserve requirement, they can actually inject cash into the system. The European Central Bank uses overnight lending markets to do a lot of their operations as well. And so I think when we talk about like monetary policy tools, there are a couple more tools that the Fed could turn to. But right, like the Fed won't be able to control the velocity of money via a central bank digital currency for many years. And what's their preferred policy tool, right? They've made it abundantly clear that's QE, right? That's quantitative easing. We're going to keep interest rates low. We're going to keep printing more money. And so as we think about like, how does that influence Bitcoin over the next couple of years, I think we continue to see this money printing, and I think that's just like the best advertisement we can hope for Bitcoin. And I think that leads to a lot of people onboarding onto sort of like this crypto journey that we've all embarked on. So,
Lawrence, what's going on? I want to hear your comments, and then I'm going to ask Morgan some more questions because he's smart.
What's up, gentlemen? How we doing this morning?
Good morning, Lawrence.
The thing I'll jump on here, I guess, is what you guys were just kind of talking about. The thing that popped in my head between Morgan's comments and Alan's comments about CBDCs is that it made me think of like Apple and the way it markets its products. And I think that CBDCs do have the potential of getting more people to adopt Bitcoin. And here's the reason why I believe that. When you look at Apple in a regular marketplace, right? Apple does a really, really good job of marketing. One, they do make great products, but I think most people, even if they're Apple fans, right, would agree that if you lined up the value proposition of an Apple product net to like a PC, right? Let's just talk about the computer space. If you directly compare two of those, you would probably find that the price point and the value that comes back to you is better in a PC, right? Because of the price points that Apple uses. So Apple goes to great lengths to make sure that in their store space, they created the Apple Store so that there's a sterile environment for you to view Apple products in a bubble without directly comparing them to another place. You look at all the other stores inside of when they moved into Best Buy, they created an Apple experience. They did not want their product lined up on a shelf next to a Dell or like a Samsung. So I think that CBDCs won't have that advantage because they can't separate out their own shelf space. So I think that by CBDCs being introduced and putting people that weren't even concerned about digital cash or digital money into that space, they're naturally going to make them share that shelf space with better products, Bitcoin. So I think ultimately over time, it's a net positive for Bitcoin because it'll place people in a position where they will kind of automatically or by default compare the two, and they'll find that there's more functionality, more freedom, and more upside for the end user on the Bitcoin side.
Yeah, all great points, Lawrence. That's it's a great analogy. I do want to jump back to the quantitative easing stuff. So Morgan, you probably know way better than I. But from some of the reading, there's just some things that just don't make sense to me. Is how you can print more money and keep interest rates low and not suffer the consequences of devaluing the people's money without the prices of goods and services rising. We've seen here in July, everything's opened back up in the country, and all of a sudden the number comes out 6.5% inflation. And they're like, it's only certain sectors like lumber, it's not going anywhere else. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know about that.
Yeah, so just to kind of start at the beginning, in economics, we have this concept of the classical dichotomy. And the classical dichotomy basically says, hey, there are real variables in the economy, and then there are nominal variables in the economy. So what do I mean by that? So real variables are things like value, like GDP. So like the value that's created in the economy, that would be like real GDP. So like the real value that's created in an economy, right? That's a real variable. Over the long term, that's going to stay pretty consistent in its growth, right? Like, and then the idea is that like nominal variables can't affect that. So if you look at the price level, for example, that's a nominal variable. So you can price that value in dollars, and over time you can price that value in more and more dollars because the purchasing power of dollars are going down. But that doesn't affect the underlying value that the economy is generating. So in other words, right, like even if we get a bunch of inflation and I'm buying a bagel for $6 instead of $4 now, that doesn't change the value of the bagel to me, right? Because I have to use more dollars to do it, like that's kind of irrelevant. And so there's this idea that that over time, right, like you can't mess with the price level in order to kind of get more value out of the economy. Economists kind of cheat on this point, and they kind of try to lead it out because they've figured out ways that they can kind of get people to spend a little more, have companies hire more people. And that's sort of like almost like a psychological tool that they're using instead of like actually affecting the real economy. And so your question, right, like how can we expect to increase the monetary base, right, aka printing more money, keep interest rates low, and not expect to get a price increase, or at least have that price increase be anything less than temporary, or anything less than temporary? The answer is just no, right? Like there's this concept as well called the Fisher equation, and it basically equates the monetary base to price inflation. So if you look at it, right, like if you print more money, can you change GDP by printing more money? Like not really. So like what has to adjust in that equation? It has to be the price level. And so because that's a nominal variable, that's the only thing that can budge, because you're not going to get any more growth of the economy. And so you know, sometimes I think it's a little bit more complicated than that in practice, because we do get these variables like velocity, right? Like this equation assumes that velocity is constant, and we've kind of learned over time that it's not. And governments want to manipulate that. But long story short, right, like these nominal variables are going to adjust so that the real variables don't. And price level is a nominal variable, so it's going to adjust.
So, okay. So it's very, so a lot of it's very Keynesian, where the economy incentivizes the individual not to save, not to spend their money, because prices are going up, and that in order to get the maximum value out of your dollar, it needs to be spent on either a good or a service, because if you hold on to it longer term, you're not going to be able to acquire the same good or service for same said price. The problem with the money printing, and like the bagel analogy, that a $4 bagel to a $6 bagel is still the same. That's assuming that your wage matches the inflation increase. But unfortunately, as we know how capitalism here in the US works, is that prices go up, corporations make more money, and the people at the top get to see the big raise, and everybody at the bottom still gets the same substandard living wage year after year. And slowly, before you know it, you've been working the same job for 10 years, and you're getting paid, while you're technically getting paid more, you're actually making the value of your dollars like 30 to 40% less.
Yeah. And actually, Alan, it goes further than that, because the system's actually predicated on the fact that the wage won't actually keep up. If you look at like the Fed's policy goals, it's like they list, interest rate stability, price stability, and then high growth and high employment. And how do they achieve high employment, right? As like a monetary institution, they do exactly what you just talked about. They make sure that the price level outpaces the price of labor, right? AKA wages. And so the cost of hiring more people actually becomes lower for these institutions. And so a given company, right, if they now can sell their bagels for $6, well, hell yeah, we'll hire a couple more people. And so they can keep employment high, because the real wage is being pushed down. So if you think about like what's actually happening here, like we've got a federal minimum wage. I don't actually know what the number is right now. Probably like around like what, $7 or something like that.
I think some states have pushed to 14.
Okay, yeah. So in California here, it's like 15 to 20. So I've kind of lived in a bubble of high minimum wage for a little while, but
basically, but the prices over there are high, and your taxes are very high too.
Exactly. And so what they're doing is they're printing more money, and so the price of a wage in nominal dollars, stays the same, right? But as far as value goes, it's actually lower. So you're paying out less value to less purchasing power out to your employees. So what they're doing is they're actually pushing the cost of wage low to put the labor market in better equilibrium for more people basically to get hired.
Well, it's a lot of short-term thinking. So the initial thought there, the surface level sounds good. Okay, you're creating more jobs, you're having more job openings, but what you're doing by doing it in that manner is you're devaluing the value of the employees by adding more, and then you're knowing that they're replaceable. So what we're doing is, rather than trying to focus on putting talent into productive jobs like doctor, lawyer, manufacturing, We're creating all these service-based roles, and then like the only way to get like a promotion really is to play the politics of whatever company you're playing at, regardless of skill or value. And like now we're at this point where we've cut wages so much that like McDonald's and restaurants and all these other places, no one wants to work for them because I'm going to work for you. But like saying that I worked at McDonald's literally proves no value to a future employer.
Well, and also like now that we've printed so much money, the rate of inflation is so high, the wage that McDonald's is paying, right, even though it might be the same in nominal dollars as it was before, the real wage is lower because of inflation. And so that's what the Fed's doing on purpose, right, to achieve its policy goals. It's just lowering the real wage by printing money. And so, and purchasing power, it's getting completely eroded, which is unfortunate.
So my lead up to all this is, do you really think CBDCs are that far off? Because I feel like, I don't know. I mean, I think 3-4 years to me doesn't seem like that far off. That seems like a reasonable time scale. I think it might actually happen sooner than that. I think we might see things in a year and a half to 2 years, especially depending on how the production of tech goods, especially over in Taiwan, and seeing what China does with Taiwan and all that. I think that's going to play a big factor. But I really do think that CBDCs are going to be ushered in a lot faster than we think. And hyper Bitcoinization is going to happen. But I see Shawn's hands raised. I've been rambling for a while. So what's up, Shawn?
Two questions. So first one, and this is for everybody. Does Bitcoin require a revolution? If the answer is yes, should we champion CBDCs?
Paul, you go first, man. And then Christopher, and then I want to hear Lawrence, and then we'll go.
I'm kind of scared to answer this question.
No, I mean, I know what you're saying. So look, I think maybe after this, we could talk a little bit about the Bword Conference that happened earlier this week. But, I think what we'll see is, there's a lot of companies who are looking at, Coinbase and Square and Tesla and MicroStrategy and like Marathon Mining, who have Bitcoin on their balance sheet, and these like publicly traded companies. So I think that conversations is happening across boardrooms, all, not just America, but all over the world, right? But they'll probably look at Bitcoin like, well, there are some concerns regarding asset volatility and regulatory uncertainty and ESG principles, but then they start looking at stablecoins and say, well, these are pretty attractive yields compared to what we're getting, our corporate treasuries earning in cash. And I could see some companies later this year, we'll maybe see some announcements even sooner of, moving maybe 1% of their corporate treasury into like USDC because they feel safe working with Circle. And then, that might eventually lead to like a small allocation in Bitcoin. So I could definitely see stable coins kind of being kind of like the gateway drug to Bitcoin for, publicly traded companies. So, and then in nation states, I mean, look at El Salvador. So it'll be interesting to see, but I think we need some kind of regulatory clarity regarding stable coins. And I don't like some of these politicians out there just kind of spouting off nonsense where they haven't really educated themselves about, the advantages of blockchain. And yeah, there are risks and everything, but I think the advantages greatly outweigh the disadvantages. So I think we got to really push stable coins to those who are hesitant, because it's going to take a long time to educate them on Bitcoin. But, I have friends who are like, oh, Bitcoin's a scam, blah, blah, blah. But once they learned about it, they're like, oh, I'm going all in. So it's going to take a while to educate people on Bitcoin, but stable coins, it's a much easier education process. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's going to be a revolution for sure, but I think it's going to be a peaceful revolution because there's no country to bomb. So when you remove the, having that land and take the power away from being able to create war, which is what the monetary system does, it's going to be a peaceful revolution because I think they're going to kind of do what Bitcoin will kind of do and blockchain will do what Uber did. They're not asking for permission. They're going to get the general population to understand its benefits. And then once the genie's out of the bottle, there's no putting it back in. You know what I mean? The government, if you have this technology that's benefiting all citizens in the world and they're using it on their applications and phones, and then the government goes, oh, we're going to take that away. I just don't see that happening. So I feel like there's going to be these applications that begin to spring up and show the benefits of what blockchain can do, and like the way Facebook showed how communication can be done in different ways. And once people realize the benefits of that, there's no going back. So I feel it'll be peaceful revolution digitally online, with online communities led by thought leaders like Pomp and people that understand that overall vision and are doing things like this, putting classes and people like us together to work on those solutions to make them be so, you know, and get them out there so people really understand the benefits of the freedom and liberty that a true Bitcoin does. Because in terms of CBDCs, like I just look at that as a chain leading back to Bitcoin. Like, you know, I said this earlier in the class, like, you know, Bitcoin is like Rome. All roads lead to Rome and all chains lead to Bitcoin. So if you have this chain, CBDCs, compared next to, like, you know, Lawrence was saying on the shelf with Bitcoin, the people are obviously going to see the better choice is Bitcoin, and then they're going to start walking down that road and taking that chain rather than, you know, using the CBDCs. It makes perfect sense.
Hey guys, look, I gotta go eat lunch and then do my homework for the Crypto Academy.
We're
Good man.
For sure.
I know, but I
sure,
just want to make some points. So what I would like is I'll listen to this tomorrow when you guys drop the podcast. But I would love to hear your thoughts on, you know, the Bword Conference and, you know, what your take on that. But my final point for you, Alan, listen, man, I think it's great. You're going to go down to El Zonte and kind of, you know, help build the community down there and do whatever you're going to do. It's a huge risk. Look, I got on a plane to Tokyo 4 days after I graduated from Vanderbilt. It was scary. I didn't know anybody. I had like one cheap suit. I didn't have a job, but I made it happen. And I had an attitude like I will not fail. And I was just going to go there for a couple of years and then go back to business school, but I ended up spending 20 years. You know, half of that was in Tokyo, but I lived in, you know, Beijing, Shanghai, Hong Kong, Singapore. I speak Japanese and Mandarin, and that's kind of defined who I am today. So I think you take the risk, man, and just go for it. It's terrifying, but I think you'll look back and think that it was the right decision to make.
Yeah, the terrifying aspect is there for sure. There's some days I wake up and I'm like, I'm batshit crazy for doing this. And then I really start thinking about it and I'm like, no, God damn it, this is the right choice. I feel ultra, like it feels just, I've never in my life, aside from marrying my wife, have I felt so right about making a choice like this. So
look, man, it's a big risk, but man, more risk, more reward. So I say go for it. So look, man, you guys have a good day. I'm gonna watch this tomorrow, but I got to do my homework, and I'm
for sure, Paul.
I'm gonna eat my lunch now. So
thanks for dropping in, man. Take care. We'll see you.
Yeah, I've got to run too. But real quick before I go, I kind of thought the whole Bword conference was a kind of a nothing burger. I don't know. I'll kind of drop that bomb and watch the recording later.
Yeah, for sure.
See what you guys think. Hot take. All right.
I thought that too originally. I've kind of changed a little bit since then. So you'll have to peek in for that conversation.
I will.
I'm sorry. I think it was a nothing burger for people in crypto, but I think for people outside of crypto, like you look at Busta Rhymes, he's like, I heard the Bword conference and now I'm buying Bitcoin. Like, you know, so for us, it kind of was just regurgitation of a lot of stuff that we kind of already knew. We maybe learned a couple new things, but you know, for people that don't understand, hearing those three people talk about it in a way that they may have never thought about thinking it, it definitely, you know, rattled some cages into people in terms of looking into it and buying it and just bringing more attention to it in general. So, yeah.
Good. All right. See you guys later.
See you, Morgan.
Peace.
Before we jump into the Bword, I do want to hear from Lawrence. And then I see Michael's jumped in here as well. How's it going, Michael? Michael, the question that Shawn had asked was, do we think Bitcoin requires a revolution? And if yes, should we be championing, I can't speak today. Should we be proponents of CBDCs then? Before you answer, Michael, I'm going to let Lawrence answer the question, and then I'll let you give your opinions on that as well, Michael, if you like.
Characteristic of me, this will be a short answer to Shawn's question. Yes, Bitcoin absolutely requires revolution because we need to turn over an old system and try our best to install a new one, or at the very least, have a parallel system installed next to it. I believe that's going to happen. So yes, it does require revolution, especially because the government's incentives and the incentives of the people, particularly those that are adopting Bitcoin, I believe they run counter to each other. And then once again, pointing to incentives, I don't think we need to champion CBDCs. It's just going to happen. It's inevitable because they have to make a move. They have to increase the digital usability and scalability of their money. So we know it's coming. And like I said, once that happens, we get that comparison. And I think, you know, on a long enough time scale, which I believe we have, Bitcoin wins out. So no, I don't think we need to champion the CBDCs. I think it's going to happen all and by itself.
Michael, what do you think, man?
I don't really have an opinion on it. I really don't. I'm too much of a newbie. I think there's kind of a macro and a micro level to it. I kind of agree what he just said. You know, the train has left the station. The NFTs alone, you know, is something that's just going to drive Bitcoin's the base layer. You know, it's radically already changing insurance, banking. I mean, just everything, and it's at the doorstep. Has it reached a tipping point? I don't think so. I don't know. It's soon. I'm not sure. But on a different level, yeah, it's a tectonic shift. You know, you've got China versus the U.S. Is that when I went to Bitcoin 2021 Miami, part of me is super excited, and part of me says, wow, these people don't even know what they're up against sometimes. And then again, I do think they know what they're up against. So I'm scattered. I'm all over the board. I'm too much of a newbie. So I'm still going down rabbit holes. So I don't really have an opinion, honestly. I'm just observer here.
For sure, Michael, for sure. I appreciate you coming in and giving in your words. I think technically we're all still newbies. I mean, the space is still so new. We have the ability now to come together so easily and kind of iron out our ideas and thoughts about where the Bitcoin space is going. But Shawn, to answer your question, I agree with Lawrence that Bitcoin absolutely does require a revolution. There is a revolution going on right now, and it's the only peaceful revolution that we've seen in mass in the history of man. Christopher made a great point. There's no country, no individual, no person to bomb, kill, or take out. And it's set up in such a beautiful way that the adoption doesn't have to be imposed from top down. The adoption comes from bottom up. So the people that have the least to lose have the most to gain from adopting Bitcoin, and the people that have the most to lose at the same time can also jump in, but they might be more on the slower end of the adoption curve because they don't see the necessity for it right now. And people always kind of rebut that point by saying like, oh, well, what if they attack the miners, or, oh, what if they attack the nodes? And it's like, well, the financial incentive is just, by the time it becomes that big of an issue, it's like, it's more beneficial to join the network purely off of a financial monetary standpoint than it would be to attack the network. So do we need to be champions of CBDCs? No, I don't think so. I don't want to encourage the foreign actors or bad government actors to enact CBDCs. But if they are implemented, and I think they will be, I think there's a very good chance that they will be, much like Lawrence said, much like Christopher said, when you put them on the shelf of options, Bitcoin is going to be way more attractive than any currency that can be manipulated or abused, just like the dollar currently is in this point in time. Will it impede the adoption of Bitcoin? No, I don't think so. I stand firmly strong on the idea that Bitcoin works, or the CBDCs will be a Trojan horse for the adoption of Bitcoin. So yeah.
A comment that commonly gets made with Bitcoin is it's the only peaceful revolution. Does the absence of physical violence imply peace? I don't think it does.
So it's hard to say. I like what you're bringing up here, because a lot of people necessarily don't talk about it. I like using the word most peaceful because it doesn't mean it's 100% peaceful. There's going to be a lot of people who either don't adopt or are too slow to the adoption curve. And Bitcoin isn't creating a system of equality or equity. It's creating a system of fairness. And when you have a system of fairness, that means there's going to be winners and losers. And ultimately, those losers they're going to be hurting, whether that's physically or financially. And it's hard to say, but in my mind, and I don't ever wish ill will upon anybody, but I think those losers are going to be the people who are most blinded by the money spigot, and most of those people have direct influence or receive direct benefit from the printing of money. Now, the people that I do get more concerned about are those that aren't very educated on the subject matter, or don't care about investing, or don't have the time to learn to invest because their standard of living is so slow. But that's where I think it's really important for you and I, Shawn, Lawrence, and anybody else to educate and let all the people know. Because like I said, this is a very bottom up movement. And yeah, it's a long-winded wrapped question. Does it necessarily mean that it's 100% peaceful? No, I can't say that, because inevitably when you're involving finances and money and wealth and the redistribution of wealth, inevitably some people are going to be hurt by that.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. So from this day forward, I'm changing what I call it. I'm no longer going to represent as a peaceful revolution. I'm going to call it a nonviolent revolution, because we can speak absolutely for the absence of violence, but Shawn's right. We can't say it's an outright peaceful, because it is an attack. Let's call it what it is. It's an attack on the current system. So yeah, it's nonviolent.
The one big comment that constantly gets brought up is the absence of land to attack. And the way I look at it is adoption is the land to attack. The blockchain is the land to attack. There is a space that Bitcoin has to fight for. And that's where, you're going to have you're going to have FUD. You're going to have China come in, they're going to ban it. They're going to do what they can do. Why are so many people in crypto so concerned with doxing? Because they're scared of some form of violence towards them, right? Like that's something that's a real fear. That's part of why this stuff even exists. So to say that there isn't land that's being fought for, to say that your financial well-being, the financial well-being of your family, being doxxed and all that sort of stuff, depending on how any particular company, country, organization of multiple states, whatever, attack the platform. We can't call it peaceful just because somebody's not being physically hurt. And at this point, somebody's not being physically hurt yet, right? Like something like this, you're changing the entire monetary system. Is there going to be an outright war where somebody's wearing blue coats and somebody's wearing red coats? Probably not. But that doesn't mean that the loss of whatever you've achieved financially because you got into this thing and the particular country that you're in decided that they wanted to completely rail against it. And now your own financial well-being is much more distraught than it was the day before. Now you're struggling to pay your bills. Now maybe housing's an issue. Now maybe feeding your family's an issue. To me, that's violence.
So my rebuttal to that, I don't disagree with you. A lot of people are worried about being doxxed because the reward of being such an early adopter to such a revolutionary technology is insanely tremendous. I mean, people are going to really look back and look at 10 million Satoshis, which is, I believe, 0.1 Bitcoin, as a lot of money. If we do go on a Bitcoin standard and Bitcoin becomes the monetary standard of the world, 0.1, I think you can get 0.1 Bitcoin right now for about $3,000. There's a lot of people that are saying that Satoshis are going to go on par for 1 for 1 to the dollar. And if we're really at a Bitcoin standard, they're going to go far. They're going to surpass far and above that. So I think some people are worried, but the sad thing is like, if those people die, the network's fine. And I think that's what people mean by there's no land to attack Bitcoin. There's no way to manipulate or mute or censor the network by going after certain individuals. Sure, certain individuals can be attacked. They very well could be as a way to instill fear. But the network has grown and surpassed the point of destroying it, that a country has entirely adopted it. That I think, I don't like necessarily speaking for all Bitcoiners. But I think when we say that, it's not that there can't be violence towards a person or individual, but there can't be violence towards the protocol itself.
I think whenever we talk about the network and the improbability of it being, infiltrated, attacked, stuff like that, it's all very true, right? Like it's a very strong network. It's very hard to beat. But I think whenever we're talking about a revolution, whenever you're talking about whatever you want to classify this as a sort of fight, sometimes it's not about winning, it's about not losing as long as possible. And that fight alone will drive people to do things, even if it's improbable to beat, even if it's improbable to stop, slowing it down to get out of whatever position that you're in, seeing what's going to happen over the long term. I think that those incentives alone will drive people to attack in whatever ways they can. And I don't think we know what ways they can attack right now. I'm not saying attack the network, right? I'm saying attack the value, attack the education, attack the proponents, shut down channels, stuff like that. I think that sort of stuff will go a lot farther, just because it's not about winning for them. It's about not losing until they can get out.
I think I invite attacks because I really firmly believe it strengthens the network. I think if any individual country were to start doing something like that, and this is the way democracy and capitalism works, is that innovation flows to the area with the least amount of red tape. So I don't think it's out of the question to think that some government entity, out of fear, and we kind of seen this with China, we've seen this in India, we've seen this in Nigeria, where a ban is instituted. Granted, they haven't targeted individuals, they've just targeted the currency. But we also know of a lot of safe havens in places. I mean, Germany, for example, like you can buy, sell, trade Bitcoin with no tax implementations. Now in El Salvador, since it's a currency, you can, if you're a resident of El Salvador, you don't have to pay taxes anywhere else. You can buy, sell, trade Bitcoin without having to pay any property taxes or any of the sorts on that. So I think countries that make that poor decision to want to attack, or government entities that make that poor decision to attack individuals, they're going to see a lot of wealth flee the country tremendously fast, insanely fast. In the US itself, while originally hash rate and mining power was incredibly concentrated in China, the biggest users and buyers of Bitcoin have always been in the United States. And now that China's instituted their ban and US is looking there's a lot of US investors from both the energy sector and financial sector that are hungry at the opportunity to bring this hash power online here in the States. They're jumping on it. And I think we're at a point here in the US that we have not only a large portion of the population and citizens that are involved in the purchasing of Bitcoin and storing their wealth in Bitcoin, but now we have corporations. We have at the state level, places like Texas and Wyoming that are very pro Bitcoin, and even in the city of Miami. I'm sure Governor Suarez, I mean, they'd have to go after Cynthia Lumens, Governor Suarez, Governor Greg Abbott of Texas and stuff now to kind of stop this movement. I just think it's a beast that's too big to slow down.
I agree. I just don't think that makes it peaceful.
Non-violent.
I've seen a lot of eyebrow raises.
Yeah.
You got anything you want to add?
I mean, it all depends on your definition of peaceful. Like peaceful does have a definition, but my definition of peace may be different than to yours. You know what I mean? Like if I'm coming from something that's so shitty, even though it's not quite as, even though it's better and there's still problems with it, it's a lot more peaceful than the world I was coming from. You know what I mean? So I think your explanation, your counterpart is great, and I think it isn't just completely peaceful. It's the most peaceful nonviolent resolution. I think we kind of can come up with. I think that's going to be what I use it now after this conversation. So thank you. Yeah, that's awesome.
Lawrence, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I'm just saying Shawn always makes people think, man. You need to start sharing that knowledge on the Twitter.
Yeah, I think he just he's gonna okay, Shawn, you need to come on to Spaces for once, because like I don't want to steal your mind blowing. You're gonna adjust the way a lot of Bitcoiners talk on Twitter, which is I think gonna be freaking awesome.
I do like try to every time I hop on, it's like some random ass conversation that has nothing to do with Bitcoin. And I give it like 10, 15, 20 minutes and I'm like, all right, this isn't shifting. I got shit to do. And I fucking hop off and like, I never get anywhere. I hop on at the wrong time.
Yeah, I've noticed lately you got to hop into some rooms off the bat, or else they'll divulge into aliens, or they'll be talking about sports, or who knows. You kind of figure out.
Space with Lawrence yesterday, and of course, like whenever I jumped in, they're talking about like the host of it's like asking this woman. He's like, "Is it true that women say that they can multitask? Because I don't think they can." And I'm like, "That's not what I'm here for. That's not."
Oh my goodness. It devolved sometimes.
We were in no, I wasn't devolved. I was in there with my man Mutinous. He opens spaces that are non-Bitcoin spaces. Mm-hmm. So like, Shawn just followed me to the wrong part. It's hilarious too, because every time I'm on spaces, if I jump into somebody's room when I become a speaker, you see all these Bitcoiners start streaming in. I'm like, nah, this ain't a Bitcoin room. Y'all gonna be mad disappointed right now.
Read the title.
I swear, I thought it said Bitcoin general topics, and I made that up. That wasn't real, apparently.
It was not real. It definitely didn't say that in the title.
So that's I will try my best to get better on Twitter.
All right, guys, I got about 30 more minutes. There is one more topic I do want to touch on before we close the room down here. And it's the biggest thing that happened this week. Seems like with price action kind of going down, a lot of news is kind of sort of stifled. But this is some big news, and it disappointed a lot of Bitcoiners. We had Lawrence on the podcast actually last night, and we briefly talked about it. So Lawrence, bear with me. We're going to have the same conversation we had the night before again. But the Bword Conference, I know I listened to it. Lawrence listened to it. Shawn listened to it. Christopher, Michael, I don't know if you guys had a chance to listen to the conference as well.
I did. Yeah.
So before I chime in,
I think it was like
you two go ahead, chime in on it, please. Man, wait, real quick before I do that, I did have a question asking where the best country to refine the Spanish language today. I think what you were asking was where's the best place to kind of learn the Spanish language. I would avoid going the Spaniard Castilian route because there's a lot of people that hate the lisp that comes with speaking in the Spanish form. And since Bitcoin is making a move into Latin America, I would look into Central American type dialects and slang. But unfortunately, there's not a lot of books that really teach that kind of stuff. It's more one of those things is you should probably learn from books first, pick up on the verb conjugation, pick up on just kind of how to form sentence structures, practice writing, listen to some sort of medium, whether it's podcasts or news in Spanish. That's a great way to learn. That's how I maintain my knowledge and understanding of Spanish. But the best way is really just like anything else is to go travel there, get down there, start speaking it, People might laugh at you a little bit at first, but the Latin American culture is so great that they really appreciate foreigners attempting to speak their language instead of just going to them and trying to speak in English. It might take a little bit to kind of get to where you want to go, but they're definitely very grateful when somebody that's not of their culture tries to make an attempt to speak that question. So Ellen, I hope that answers your question. But to get back,
Alan,
yeah,
Alan,
what's up,
I
Michael?
spent 60 days in a couple of years ago in Medellin, Colombia.
Nice.
A friend
Scary.
of mine, yeah, I spent a lot of time in Bogota as well and a couple other places. There's a friend of mine who runs a Spanish language school. It's a hostel school, and the Colombians have a neutral accent, so it's super easy to learn from the Colombians. So he's from Salt Lake City. He's like the American customer service matched with the affordability of Colombia. And COVID almost put him out of business last year. So he still runs his business, but now has a whole online module. So if you don't want to travel to Medellin, if that's not on your list, you could hook up with him and do his online classes. He's been doing it for several years. They have a good a good language school. I can put his website in the chat if you want. And then separate, next topic real quick before you go on. Alan, you're going to El Zonte, right?
I am. I'm doing 2 trips, hopefully, before I make the move down there. But yeah, I will be moving down to, I'll be actually moving down to San Salvador, but I'll be doing a lot of work in El Zonte.
What's your time frame on that?
I should be, it's hard I didn't really anticipate all the Delta variant stuff going on. So I don't know what kind of travel restrictions are going to be imposed here in the next couple months. But for sake of time frame and time reference, if everything is smoothed out, there is no barriers to travel. I should be making the first visit. Originally it was September. I don't think that's realistically going to happen. So I think the second visit was planned for December, January. So we'll be down there again. And then the third visit will be March. And then the move will occur at the beginning of April.
Wow. Okay. The reason I ask is I'm slow traveling Latin America right now. And I have a window. My earliest I could be in El Salvador would be November, but I could potentially spend November, December, January there. I know they'll allow you to stay longer, but I'm considering being there that time frame. So if you want to get a coffee or
we should
like that, we could meet up. And I don't have any particular agenda there other than just the broad Bitcoin. I want to check out El Zonte and see what that's about.
Michael, I would love to. And I got some friends on Twitter that are willing to pay for bar tab, coffee tab, whatever, by streaming some sats. So I'd be happy to have you join in on the Twitter space. You should, if you're not already on Twitter, I highly encourage hopping on. And
okay,
then,
how do I connect with you on Twitter? I'm on now.
If you search at Allen, ALLEN, HODL, HODL, no spaces, you can follow me on there. And then my very good friend Teo does the free sat Saturdays where he teaches people how to use Moon Wallet. And he gives away, I believe it's 1,000 sats or so. Sometimes he gives away 10, sometimes 2,000 sats. He gives away 2,000 sats. Lawrence is correcting me on this.
I just downloaded Moon. I need to do that. When's the next session? Probably next Saturday then?
It's actually right now.
Right now. Okay. So I'll drop his at handle if you want to hop into that, Michael. Actually, I really highly encourage getting the chance to meet Teo. Teo's such an awesome guy. I'll drop his at handle in the chat here, but it's at Teo. And he's gonna totally hate me I was calling him Tao for the longest time, and I finally realized his name is actually pronounced Teo.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's actually Teo. It's not Tao. So it was like a light bulb moment for a lot of us. We've been calling him. He never said anything.
The thing is, and then the cold thing is, I was totally like going at Ozzy for calling him Teo, like correcting her.
Really? That's how funny. She's gonna I'm gonna have to tell her that. Michael, it's in the chat. It's Tao. It's TAODEJING. Follow him on Twitter. You get some free sats on Saturdays. He does it throughout the week as well. But I pop in on occasion. Lawrence pops in on occasion. He's doing what he's doing with that for as far as like adoption and teaching people about the Lightning Network. So awesome.
Awesome. Thank you. I just followed you, and I'm just putting his in the my Twitter.
Awesome.
Well, thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No,
And,
all good, Michael. Christopher, go ahead, man.
I gotta run. I gotta finish up my homework. So hate to
For
dip out
sure.
early. I definitely want to be on board, but I want to make sure I get it in by 5 o'clock. today,
I
so-
gotcha. All you guys are slackers hopping out of here. Like, I haven't gotten my homework done.
Well,
Don't want
I-
Kenny or
I'm-
Morgan yelling at me.
I've been trying to think of all week of how I'm gonna explain it to my 5-year-old. Like, I asked Kenny if I could use, Bitcoin as a general purpose technology and explain it in that asset, but I just don't know how I'm gonna do it to my 5-year-old. I'm thinking I'm gonna do like, he likes frogs, so I'm thinking like egg, tadpole, like frog, and the evolution of general purpose technologies and how we've gotten to where we are. But I gotta simplify it down to a 5-year-old. So
Don't let Alan give you shit, because the day that we had to do the video assignment, we filmed a podcast episode that day, and it was like 3 o'clock, and he still hadn't done it.
Don't be me. Go do the homework.
pleasure, guys. I'll talk to you soon. I'll see you next week too.
Later, Christopher.
hey,
All
Alan,
right.
I got to drop. I have not even started the homework, so that's my next priority. Hey, I just got your tile link. Is his real name Bruno De Mori?
My tile link.
No, I'm sorry. Maybe I got the tile. I'm searching. I did the @Tio Dejin, and it came up with a name of Bruno De Mori.
That's because his @ name is Tao Dejing 2. So all one word with the number 2.
My bad.
Thank you.
You got it.
Good catch. Good catch, Lawrence. I was like, that doesn't sound right. I'm like, I swear to God, I put his @handle in right. Okay, so Michael, thanks for dropping in. I guess just to wrap up the point on this podcast for the listeners, since we were going to talk about the B word, but everybody else dropped out.
You guys can watch the episode with Lawrence. I'm joking.
Yeah, go watch that episode.
It's all of us again. Like
all of us again. But to I guess summarize kind of what we were saying in that episode, and for anybody listening. So the Bword Conference occurred. If you haven't watched it, pause this, go watch it. It's about an hour. It's Cathie Wood, Jack Dorsey from Square and Cash App, and then the infamous Elon Musk. And it was think of how rowdy and rambunctious Bitcoin 2021 was. The B word is the tea sipping educational flip side of that coin that occurred. And so it was an even balance out for both people. But there was a lot of great things that came out of that conference before the big main event. There was kind of a pre and post show. The pre kind of was set up to dispel a lot of myths that Bitcoin, a lot of arguments Bitcoin receives, such as Bitcoin's used for illegal transactions, Bitcoin's energy consumptive. There's a number of rebuttals that they put out on there. But that was very informative, very good. So that was my favorite part of the entire thing. But there was also the big main event which I think a lot of us Bitcoiners we over assumed what was going to be. But it was the conversation amongst Musk, Jack, and Cathie Wood. And it was very nobody got murdered. I just put it that way. But Shawn, Michael, if you got some time before you walk out, I just real quickly would like to hear your thoughts on what you thought about the Bword Conference.
You know, it was cool that he did the moon shout out. That was kind of cool. I was really happy also to see, you know, I was happy to see Kathy Wood to check the ESG box. I know that was, she was speaking to institutions there. That was a needed message. So she had to go like knock that out of the park. I think she did a good job of saying, hey, this Bitcoin is ESG, is the solution. Her exact words, I have it on my notes, but it's pretty strong. She said it is the solution to ESG. So that was cool.
Yeah, I agree. I guess before I'll spill the beans here, I thought the conference wasn't for Bitcoiners. It was for everybody that wasn't in Bitcoin already. I think that was the target audience. And I think they did a very good job at displaying what Bitcoin can bring to the table.
Exactly. That's true. I believe that.
In short, I think Bitcoiners expected a correction, and instead it was an onboarding, and that was just improper expectations.
Well said. Lawrence, have your thoughts changed on it? I know you were feeling a little kind of disappointed by the outcome of the conference.
Well, no, it wasn't that. Once again, like you talked about, it was our view of it, you know? Mm-hmm. We expected it to be one thing. It was indeed another, right? And then, like I said, when the Bword first was announced, its intention was to create an online resource for institutions that want to look into the investment or adoption of Bitcoin. They created that. The website still lives. Because like even now, when people say the Bword Conference, they talk about just that one little conversation with the three big names. Like that's not what it was. They achieved their goal, right? We just expected something different coming in because we don't like Car Guy and we like Jack, and we were like, Jack, get him, and that didn't happen.
No, it did not. But I think it kind of demonstrated. I think what a lot of Bitcoiners overlooked is it really did demonstrate Elon's true lack of understanding surrounding Bitcoin. And a lot of people like to lump Elon into the only decision maker at Tesla. And just because Elon doesn't understand Bitcoin doesn't mean that there's not people at Tesla that have a very good understanding of what Bitcoin does and Bitcoin can bring to the table. And we know they do because they implemented through BTC Pay Server, which is free and open source, their own version and payment onboarding methods for their Teslas. So I think that action alone goes to show, hey, there's some people in Tesla that really know what they're doing. Unfortunately, Elon just has, he really likes Twitter and he really likes stirring up shit on Twitter. And it can be kind of a loose cannon from time to time.
Or more appropriately, he is not a loose cannon from time to time. I think his default position is the loose cannon.
Yeah, he's generally loose, sometimes not. Yeah, I agree 100%. All right, guys, unless there's anything else to add to the Bword Conference, I don't go listen to the conversation I had with Lawrence. That episode should be going up here on Tuesday. Kind of jumping the line on some people here, but it was a very good conversation and I want to get it up. And it'll be in the timestamps in the description down below. Is there anything else you guys want to add before we close things up on today's episode of Sunday Scaries? All right, I'll take that as a no. So guys, thanks for joining this episode. If you made it already this far, please make sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. We record these every Saturday and I always tweet the Zoom link out on my Twitter profile at Alan Hoddle. And I also tweet it out on the podcast profile at COB Podcast. So go, if you don't want to follow me because you hate me, at least go follow the podcast Twitter, which I'm totally fine with. But guys, thanks for joining again and we'll see y'all next week.
Thanks for getting on, everybody.